All right, who are these people? And all they really talked about was the fact that you had a bunch of Garifuna and a bunch of Mestizo and a bunch of this and a bunch of that. But nobody really talked about what it was to be a Belizean. And so this pattern continued. And we came to political independence in 1981 without the people of Belize united as one force behind independence. I think it is a very tragic situation that we gained our independence in 1981 with half of the people saying yes and half of the people saying no. Because to my mind, if we as a people participated fully in the process, there are some things that politics, party politics, mind you, should never be allowed to divide us on. And our history has proven that party politics has divided us right down to an issue like independence. And if we look at the history of other countries in the rest of the region, we find exactly the opposite, that no matter how much the political parties may be in ideological opposition to each other, that basically on the question of independence, the majority of the people were overwhelmingly behind the leaders of the independence movement. What does this mean? It means then that where we are at this particular point in time in our history, when we are a part of a global picture, because we cannot look at what is happening in Belize in isolation. We have to deal with the fact that we are part of this whole big world. Right? We have to deal with the fact that we produce certain things. We produce sugar, we produce citrus, we produce banana, but basically we have no control over these prices. These prices are controlled by forces beyond us. And I think that what I am saying is that the lack of participation on the part of the people has, in a sense, caused us to continue to sit back and believe that we cannot do anything. In a sense, it has caused us to lack any sort of confidence in ourselves to try and do something about the situation that presently plagues us. I am not saying that if the people of Belize understood better who we were, that it would mean that we would solve the problems that our country is faced with. But I am saying that if we understood better who we were and if we participated more meaningfully in the process at every step of the way, that we would have more of a commitment to try and struggle for our survival. I think a classic example is the way in which many of us have left our country. And I'm not saying that to put anybody down who has left Belize. I'm saying it to say that when the times got rough, Belizeans tended to find it a lot easier to leave Belize than a lot of other people in a lot of other countries. It seems to me that many of us were victimized in our jobs if we said anything in opposition to the government of the day. It seems to me that maybe some of us had a little difficult time getting the kind of credit that we wanted because the bankers knew the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister called them and tell them, not get a man over there no money because, you know, support me, this kind of thing. This is basically what it was translated to in Belize. A few people, like for instance, a couple people in the UBAD period went to jail. During that period I was talking about, the 1930s, 40s, 50s, a lot more people in fact went to jail. And they didn't really leave the country at that particular point in time. They continued to struggle until their movement was co-opted by those people I talked about earlier. It seems to me that losing a job or not being able to get exactly the kind of salary we want is not enough of a reason to walk away from our country. But if we do not have a sense of who we are, then it is easy to walk away from a struggle. None of us can claim that we were victims of physical violence as a result of our desire to try and see things differently in our country. But be that as it may, once we left, some of us left saying that we were going to come to the United States, go to the University of the West Indies, go on to Britain, Canada, wherever it was, to improve our situation. As Sedi talked about the educational system, granted, our educational system will only allow us to go so far, but many of us left, and many of us found it quite easy to assimilate ourselves into the culture and the way of life of the country in which we found ourselves. And I say that that is all linked to the whole problem that I started off my presentation on, and that is the problem of us having not yet gone through the process of defining ourselves as one Belizean people. The irony of the situation, however, is not that so many people have left, but also that so many of us who have stayed in Belize are going through pretty much the same thing that some of us have left are going through. And that is that we're finding it so easy to be dominated by a foreign culture, a foreign ideology. So Belizeans no longer have to leave Belize to pick up an American accent. They pick it up from television. Many of you probably know that television only came to Belize in 1981. And with the advent of television in 1981, we were constantly, 24 hours a day, bombarded with American visions, American ideas, American ways of being. And what did we have to balance that off? Nothing. What images do we have of ourselves as a people? Nothing, right? So we are constantly trying to look like somebody else, and we failed miserably at doing it, because there's no way we can look like white people. No matter how hard we try, there is no way we can look like white people. In fact, the white people have a difficult time trying to look like themselves, because those images are unreal. But if the people in a country had gone through a process of not only political independence, but also cultural independence, cultural identity, creating an awareness, creating a self, then it would be a lot more difficult. I'm not saying it would be impossible, but I'm saying it would be a lot more difficult for those foreign impressions and images to just completely submerge us. We're dominated by the presence of the United States more and more. And for me, as a Belizean who is active in the struggle to try and save my country, I am particularly concerned about the kind of control the U.S. has on my country. I say we have the media, and 99.9% of it is dominated by North American programs. The government of Belize has said that 1% of the programs on television in one day must be local programs. We don't even have the capacity to do that. There's a brother in this audience right now that I've worked with very closely in Belize on television, who I know for a very fact is here not because he wants to be here, but he doesn't have the tools. Right? He doesn't have the money to be able to stay at home and do the kind of programs in television that he wants to do. And I find him to be an extremely talented person. He never gone to no school to learn it, right? But he's an extremely talented person. But he doesn't have the tools to go and help to create the 1% of programs that are needed. So how do we balance off this other image that is thrown at us? But it is not only just in terms of the media images. It is also in terms of our educational system. Sedi started off his presentation by talking about the education system in Belize. And all we've done is traded one master for another, because Up until the 1950s, we were dominated by the British in terms of what was coming out in our educational system, and now it is the Americans. What are we going to do about that? Today, when more and more Belizeans are trained, more and more Belizeans are skilled, we find that we have more Peace Corps in Belize than we did 20 years ago. Why is that? I could understand 1960, when many of us didn't have the opportunity to go away and study. The answer they give to us sometimes is that, well, we want to hire people, but we don't have the money and the Peace Corps pays them, so let's take them. And what we find today is that about 150 Peace Corps are in the country of Belize, working in all kinds of departments. You know, they work in the urban areas, they work in the rural areas, and they are another force that are creating the American images or reinforcing the American images in the minds of our people. Economically, we have no control over our economy. Right? The sugar industry is controlled by foreign interests, by Tate & Lyle. Tate & Lyle, as you may know, is a British concern. Right? The banana industry is controlled by an American concern. The citrus industry is... Nestle, right, is controlled by Nestle. Fortunately for us, and I hope that we can continue to do so, the fishing industry is controlled by Belizeans, and that is something that we need to be extremely proud about. The tourist industry, our new focus in developing the economy, is virtually 100% controlled by foreigners. Who are the Belizean people? The laborers. You know, one of the things I say in a joke, and I say it in a joke, but I'm not really joking, is that what is happening to Belizeans right now? What kind of skills do we need? All the skills that we really need right now is to just go out there and clean up for those international corporations. Right? That all we need to do if we come away to study is to get degrees, whether it's BAs or MAs or PhDs, in being bellboys, bellgirls, and cleaners, and what have you, because we have no control of our country. Right? And I am not exaggerating. Some of you might say that, you have these crazy radical people saying all these things. I am not. All right? I am painting a picture that perhaps may seem very pessimistic to some of you. But I live in hope that our country is going to be transformed. And I live in hope by being a part of that struggle. Now, some of you may choose to live in the United States, and I am not going to make any arguments with you against that. But what I'm saying to you, that even if you continue to live here, you have a role to play to ensuring that what is happening in Belize does not continue to happen. And I want to leave it there for the time being.
Now we would like to present to you the Director of SPARE, Mr. Assad Shoman.
Since I'm not as energetic as the sister, I will have to stand up to make up for that.
I want to be very brief, if possible, to allow more time for us to spend in answering any questions that you have or listening to the comments that you have, because we want to take back with us a feel about what the Belizeans in Los Angeles are thinking about the situation in Belize today as well. The organization that we represent, which is called SPARE, the Society for the Promotion of Education and Research, is, I would say, a very political organization. Very political, because our major objective is to change Belize, to transform the society, our country that is Belize. We are not happy with the way it is right now. We are not happy with the way it has ever been in its history. And we can go through our history and explain why it is that we're not happy with it. But we'll spare you that, and maybe we'll just hint at a few things as we've already done, both Wilfred and Diane, about some of the things that are happening now that we're not happy with. And that's why we want to change our society, change our country, transform it. And the only way you can change it is by political action. And so we are a political organization. That is to say, an organization that is deeply involved in political issues. We do that, however, not through the agency of party politics, but rather through education. That is the instrument we use to carry out our political work. So we are not involved with the People's United Party. We're not involved with the United Democratic Party. And we ourselves are not a party either, nor do we intend to form a party. But we believe that as citizens, as Belizeans, we, each and every one of us, has a right to participate in the political life of our country. We are called upon to do so anyhow by these two parties, who assume to themselves, and they can only do that if we let them do it, the monopoly power to think politically for the people. And we are saying at SPARE that they don't have that power. It doesn't say so in the Constitution that they have that power. The Constitution says all of us have that power. In fact, you can look in the Constitution of Belize, which is one of the things that we are concerned about that you don't know about, and the majority of people in Belize don't know what is in that Constitution. And we are going to take up that challenge and next year publish a book that is going to simplify and explain that Constitution so all of us can understand it. Because it's written in highly technical, legalistic language, right? But it means something that affects our lives. So we have a duty to understand it. And we at SPARE are going to publish one or more pamphlets and presentations that will make it easy for all our people to understand. But you can look in that Constitution and you're not going to find any reference to political parties. You're going to find reference to the rights of the people and to the power that the people have. And one way in which people can organize to express that power is through political parties, but it's not the only way. And the political parties do not have the right to monopolize the political space in a country and deprive the rest of the people of that space. And so we say we're a political organization, but a non-partisan organization. We're not supporting any political party, nor are we forming any political party. But we have to deal with political issues, because when we express the things that we're dissatisfied with the underdeveloped state of our country, with the fact that the majority of our people are underprivileged and underserved and marginalized and deprived of many of the rights that should have been guaranteed for us in our Constitution, then we know that we need to change these things, and we need to, first of all, understand what the situation is so that we know that there is a need for change, and then we have to organize properly in order to bring about that change. And we have chosen to do that through this organization called SPARE. And we are here in LA, as Sister Diane has already mentioned, because we believe that you, the people of Belize in this country and in this state and in this city, are an integral part of the nation of Belize. We are told right now that the population of Belize is 180,000, but that's of the people living there. We are told, because we have somebody working with us, a young man by the name of Dylan Vernon, excellent person who has done some research on this, and he has brought out through his studies that something like 60,000 Belizeans are living in the United States right now. So if you add that 60 to the 180, you get 240, and the 60 becomes 1/4 or 25% of the population of Belize. So 1/4 of our people are living here, are represented by yourselves and people like yourselves in these states. And we are here because we recognize the importance that you have to play, and that you are playing in the shape that Belize is taking. And we're going to point out some of those ways in which you are affecting the destiny of Belize, and suggest perhaps some ways in which you can change that or improve, let us say, the impact you're having in Belize for the better. But I need to say also that we're here at the invitation of Bredaa, the Bredaa organization, the Belizean organization, which has already been introduced to you, which is called Bredaa. And we're very happy to have been invited under their auspices. We are very proud of watching the way in which they have been operating over the past years, especially with the radio program that I understand a lot of you and others listen to every week. And we've also been invited here jointly by Bredaa and by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And you might ask, what are we doing with this All African, a big word to it, a lot of words, All African People's Revolutionary Party. What does that have to do with Belize anyway? Because there are two words in there that I think for the majority of Belizeans are words that kind of shock and frighten them, and that they don't want to see themselves associated with those words at all. And of course the first one is African, right? You don't tell no Belizean that he's an African. No, you want to hear that, right? They're not African, see? And you don't want to associate most Belizeans with the word revolutionary either, because they're going to wonder what the hell you're going to start shooting guns or what. You know? So what are we doing then? What is FAIR doing, and what is Bredaa doing with this All-African People's Revolutionary? Last year, we in SPARE had a program, and this is one of the things that SPARE does. You see, we're talking about education. And we do many things in education. One of them is, for example, the program that Diane takes care of, which is popular education. We do organizational work and consciousness building work and helping groups, small groups of farmers, of women, of students, of young people, of workers, to strengthen themselves as a group. We don't sort of do education work with individuals, but with groups of people, right, who will have an impact on themselves and on their community, to organize themselves better to change the things that are keeping them back, and to thereby help to transform the entire society. That's one of the things we do, a very important part of our work. Another thing we do is to do research and encourage other Belizeans to do research, provide forums for them to present that research. Like recently we had the 3rd annual Studies on Belize conference, when a lot of papers were developed and given at the conference. A lot of students came to those things, and in that way we provide a forum for our researchers and also provide a lot of new learning for the Belizean people. Then we go ahead and we publish the results of these research and of other research that is being done on Belize, so that, for example, when we're finished here, you can look at the back table. We have several publications, most of them which we ourselves have published, books and other things that we at SPARE have published, which for the first time are creating a pool of information about our country, which is essential, I think, to our development, to our self-knowledge and to our development. We also have other types of programs, one of which is what we call advocacy and awareness programs. And it is under that particular program last year that we as SPARE did something that really the government should have done. And the government should have done it because even in the CARICOM, which, as you know, the Caribbean community to which we belong, the governments committed themselves to do something about the fact that last year represented the 150th anniversary of the abolition of slavery in Belize and the other English-speaking Caribbean countries. And yet, the government of Belize, the churches of Belize, the trade unions of Belize, the educational system of Belize, anything else you can think of in Belize, did nothing, all right, to bring up this subject of the abolition of slavery, and to think in terms of how Belize actually is grounded in the racist institution of slavery, how that affected our history and how it is still affecting our living today. Nobody did. So we had to do it. SPARE did. And SPARE got together a program of 1 week of activities, and an important part of that program was an invitation which we issued to the All African People's Revolutionary Party to bring to Belize Kwame Ture, who is an African born here in the United States of America. Sorry, born in Trinidad. Born in Trinidad, forgive me, lived here in the United States of America, became famous in the world from the work he did here, at the time known as Stokely Carmichael, the Black Power movement in the late 60s and early 70s, which also had its counterpart, as you know, in Belize with UBAD, which is something else we can talk about. And he came, another representative of his party came, our good brother Ken, who is here with us today, Kenneth Carr, and played an integral part in helping us to conscientize our people to this institution of slavery, to the Africanness of Belize, and to what that meant for the development of Belize, and how we need to turn that around and use this as a weapon for the development of all the Belizean people. So we've had a connection, and we're very proud to have had that connection and to continue that connection with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And the word revolutionary, of course, does not either frighten or offend us. On the contrary, it attracts us, because revolution means change, right? And we are saying that we need to change Belize. We're not happy with the way Belize is today. We want to transform it, we want to change it, and therefore we want a revolution. But we're not trying to impose a particular form and shape to that revolution. As the sister very clearly said, SPARE isn't coming here with any answers for the people of Belize. We're here to provoke thinking. We're here to facilitate a process of thinking and of organizing, because we can sit around and think and talk forever, and if we don't organize, we'll never achieve anything. So we're conscious of that. And so we're here to facilitate that process. But we don't bring no blueprint for the revolution. We want to be a part of that revolution. We want all of you to also be a part of that revolution. And when we think about this thing about, you know, the African element in Belize, it brings us to a point that I would like to talk a little bit about, because it hasn't really come up in our discussion so far. It didn't come up on the radio program, but it's something that I know is very much alive in the thinking of the people of Belize, certainly at home, and I imagine here as well, which is to do with that whole ethnic situation in Belize and how that is being affected by the refugees coming in from Guatemala and Salvador, right? And you get a lot of people. For example, we had a forum, because that's one of the other things we at SPARE do. We have regular forums, like, for example, we pick a particular topic. The last one was very interesting. It was Belizeans first, how you see. Because, you know, the last campaign was run by the party that won the election on that slogan, right? And this time we had it at the Bliss Institute, and we had huge crowd of people, mostly young students, young Belizeans at that. But one of the forums we had some time ago was called the people we call aliens. The people we call aliens, because that's the word we in Belize use to refer to the Guatemalan and Salvadoran immigrants that have come into the country in large numbers since 1980 until now. And of course we use that word aliens in a very derogatory way. And an old lady there stood up and she said, well, she said she's a Creole. And the way she watched this thing, he said, Empire, they come in more and more, and they will soon take over this whole country. And then the Creole there were left with nothing, you know? And then she started to rail up to how a lot of the Creole people then left for God's sakes. And then they left, she wasn't there. They had a friend, they said, the Creole people, they go, as soon as I see the only one left with all Empire where they come in. It is something, you know, that is really exercising the minds, the you see, of the Belizean people at this time. And of course, in terms of the immigration patterns, it also seems to be true, according to the study done by Dylan Vernon, that certainly up to 85, 86, it may have changed now, the majority of those who were emigrating from Belize were from what we call the Creole community. And then after that, the Garifuna community, and then after that, like the Mestizos, right? As I said, since 85, when with the collapse of the sugar industry, that may be changing, but it certainly was the pattern until then. And it may still be, we don't know the pattern even now. But this brings us then to the question of Belizean identity, you see? Because that to us is a critical question. It is so critical that in the sort of a parent statement, when we describe what is fair, right? We use a phrase like this. We say, Belize became a state before it was formed as a nation. And therefore the national consciousness should be there to be a Belizean. What does it mean to be a Belizean, you see? And what we're talking about is 8 years after independence, we still don't know what it means to be a Belizean. And that is why we say we became a state before we were formed as a nation. And one of our duties, one of our responsibilities, we see then as trying to develop our consciousness of what it means to be a Belizean. And for us, if we try to define Belizean in ethnic terms, we're only playing into the hands of those that seek to divide us, the better to control us and rule us. Because obviously Belize, the formation, the ethnic formation of Belize was such, right, that first of all you had the Maya there, and then when the British came, they were driven back into the bush, further and further away as the British expanded their control as they went from logwood to mahogany and so on. Then you had African people being brought as slaves. And then you had people like the Garifuna, who were deported, as you know, from St. Vincent to the Bay Islands, and from there found their way along the coast, the Atlantic coast of Central America, and that included the southern part of Belize. And then in 1850, just in the middle of last century, you had that massive influx from Yucatan, when the Mestizos who were fleeing from the case war of Yucatan came into Belize as refugees. At that time, for example, when these Mestizos came into Belize, the population was very small. It was less than 10,000 people. And the numbers that came in were more than 10,000. So they more than doubled the population of Belize at the time. And that is what so changed the ethnic composition, if you like, of the territory, that resulted in the situation we have today, where the two sort of major, because none of them are in the majority, but the two major ethnic groups are the Mestizo and the Creole. When you have the Garifuna as a very significant factor as well, with something like 7 or 8%, the indigenous Maya people with about 10%. But what we are saying is that we cannot continue to define our country or our nation as the sum total of these different ethnic groups, because then what we're doing is maintaining a certain division, you see, division which has been used very effectively in order to divide the people of Belize, and especially to divide the people of Belize that are not getting the benefits of the growth or of the development of the Belizean nation, which is the workers and the farmers of Belize. And that is why, for example, we have this party political system, these two political parties, that if you study the history of the formation of these parties, you will note, for example, that in 1959, some of the older heads here will remember a name like Sir Hilary Blood, I think will come to your mind, who was a commissioner that was sent by the British to come there at that time and determine whether Belize was ready to continue constitutional step-by-step development towards self-government. And the determination of this commissioner was that Belize was not ready And the reason Belize was not ready, they said, well, because too many people were supporting one party, which was the Nationalist Anti-Colonial Party at the time. And that the two-party system had not been firmly entrenched in Belize. And that unless there is a two-party system the same as there is in England, then Belize cannot move forward, you see? Again, that concept that unless we copy exactly what they use in their system, then we are not ready to be free or to determine our own destiny, which, as you will right away see, is a contradiction in terms, because if we're going to be free, then we can be free to choose our own system too, right? But no, we're being free to accept the system that they wanted to impose on us, and unless we were ready to do that, or we had already done that, then we were not ready to continue on the step toward freedom. But the effect of that two-party system in Belize, and that was the intentional effect, of course, was to divide the working class. In other words, to create a situation where the poor people, who are not benefiting from the system, the colonial economic system that had been developed and that had been used in Belize until then, could not unite together in one political force to fight against their oppressors. So half of them went in one party and half went to the other. And until today, one of the saddest things to notice, right, is to watch in a particular division of Belize City, Mekose, in the Big Sept division, in an area where there's a lot of poverty, or in the Lake I division, or in the Khaled division, to see two groups of very poor people fighting against each other with all kind of words, and sometimes they go beyond words to sticks and stones, right? In defense of one or the other political party, when no matter which of the parties come to power, they will still stay poor. Two of them. You understand what I'm saying? But that is the way the system was created, to precisely bring about that effect. So what are we in SPARE saying? We are saying we cannot base it on these divisions that we have, the ethnic divisions or these party political divisions, right? But rather, we have to look for what unites us. And the best way we can look for what unites us is to look at what divides us. And what it is that divides us, what is it that is keeping the majority of our people poor, no matter what happens. And I think we are wise enough, all of us, to conclude that a lot of things have changed in our country over the years, right? Before we used to have slavery, and then they said we don't have slavery again. Although the day after the slavery was abolished, it was made impossible for the newly freed people to own land. And therefore they had to keep working for the former masters. And the salary that they began to get in 1838 was the same salary they were getting in 1938. So if that's not still slavery, tell me what it is. But they said we changed from slavery to freedom. We changed our economy from forest economy to agricultural economy. And now we look like we're going into tourist economy. All right? We changed from colonial status to independent status. Not a big change. We changed from PUP to UDP and now back to PUP. Right? And throughout all these changes, what is the one thing that remained the same? That a few Belizeans are Belizeans first, or first-class Belizeans, and the vast majority of Belizeans remain poor and powerless. Isn't that true? I mean, isn't that what is happening in our country? The question is, why is that happening? And what can we do about it? These are the questions that SPARE is asking. These are the questions that we're trying to provoke a thinking and discussion about. And we have some ideas about it. We're not saying we have the answers. The answers are with the people. But we are intending to continue to work with the people and to facilitate a process of education and transformation in order to bring up these answers. And we're here to share these thoughts with you and to put ourselves at your disposal in whatever other way you would think it possible. I think we'll stop there and maybe ask questions. Get questions.
We would like to, before we go on to the next phase of the program, we would like to remind our audience of the food stall next door those of you who have not sampled Belizean food, this is your chance to get a taste of Belizean food. So we like to emphasize that and remind you that that is next door. What we will be doing now is having you, the audience, participate by interchanging ideas as well as questions. Because you are here not to just listen to these people, but you are here to put in your own ideas and to ask questions. And so we want you to feel free to participate in that process, and as you raise your hand, we will identify you and make your point clear to the point so that we can have as much participation as possible. So we now go to you, the audience, in terms of questionings and ideas or points that you would like to raise in regards to what was said or what was not said that may be of concern to you. Yes, sir.
My name is Wilfred. I have some, well, sort of what I would call basic to the nation's development across the Belizeans. But my question is to you lady and gentlemen here, is that you presented many forums which are practical, but seemingly Belizeans need directives. Someone or something or an institution to which they can, but something tangible that they can hold on to, something that has substance that they can participate in, that they can, and in their participation that organization or that institution will have direct perspective in mind as to what they're going to achieve, or a first step into what they want to achieve to better the nation. And I would like for you gentlemen to respond to that. And what directives do you see as a first step that's necessary to have Belizeans move in a progressive way towards nationhood and equality with the world of nations?
All right, firstly, allow me to apologize if you understood me to say that all of those who left just left because the times were hard and they couldn't deal with it. I agree. I understand that many left because they wanted to improve themselves, and the services just were not there in Belize, because I came to the United States as well to earn my higher education. So I must apologize for that. That is not what I was saying. I was saying, however, that many left, right, because they felt that times were hard, and I'm suggesting that the times were not as hard, right, but that because of this lack of an understanding of who we are, it was much easier then to leave at the point, that they left, right? So that is what I was really saying. Yeah, it seemed to be a very difficult thing to actually get people together to deal with issues that are supposedly very important for them. When I was standing in the back there a while ago, before we actually got started, I heard someone talk about the fact that that the organizers of this thing talked about having this music, and that they lied to the people because the music is not here. And it wasn't a lie. I mean, in fact, the organizers thought that one of the ways to actually get them here was through having that music, that thing that will bring them together. We had an opportunity last night to go to 3 places where Belizeans were gathered. And as you rightly said, Belizeans are certainly having a good time, and we agree with you that we have to try to find a way to get to them, and if it means doing it in a kind of party setting, then I guess that is what we're going to have to try and do. And I think that Bredaa, if I understood you correctly, was probably trying to do pretty much the same thing when they announced that all these various groups, were going to be here. But they had some technical and logistical problems, that made that impossible to actually happen. Directives. As Assad said, we're not setting ourselves up as any kind of nucleus for a political party. But we're doing a kind of work that we hope will ultimately form the minds of the kinds of people who will ultimately say, we're tired of UDP, we're tired of PUP, we want something different, and may then see the need to organize themselves into trying to create an alternative course. That may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen 10 years from now. It may not happen in my lifetime. But I do not live for today, I do not live for tomorrow, right? I live for the future, right? I don't know if you wanted to.
I think we will have to connect the system.
Put it,
we'll continue.
All right, tell them we'll connect it and then we'll continue. Take a little break.
No, maybe you can just, if you wanted to add to that.
I think we should take a break and then let them do the system.
We need to put in the system. Yeah, since you're talking about the difficulty of being heard, I think we have a PA system here, which it will take a couple of minutes to connect, right? So if you bear with us, we'll just do that and then continue the session.
To Belizeans abroad participating in the political process, specifically absentee ballots. Next question is that a realistic question? As far as the attitudes of both governments.
I believe, which one is, yeah? Please. Did you all hear the question? Actually, maybe there's a time to ask those who are at the back of the hall. We have a lot of seats closer up front, right? If you could please come forward and occupy the seats closer so that you can maybe hear us better. The question was, what is the policy of the two parties with regard to the political participation of Belizeans living outside of Belize, in particular with regard to, say, absentee voting? That is correct. My understanding is that both parties today have the same position, which is that to allow Belizeans abroad to vote outside of Belize would be a dangerous thing to do and would be inimical to the democratic process of Belize. I think the best expression of this I got anyhow from the previous Prime Minister, Manuel Esquivel, when I was interviewing him for the book Party Politics in Belize. Because at the time it was thought, it was just after the UDP had come to government, and it was thought that they had planned to give the vote to Belizeans abroad, especially in the United States, and allow them to vote here in the States. And it was felt that the opposition party at the time, the People's United Party, was against this policy. Although, you know, I haven't got anything official from that party saying so, but what I did get from the ex-Prime Minister Esquivel was that in his view this was not a feasible thing to do for several reasons. One of them was that it was too open to fraud. You know, the system, the voting system in Belize, you always have somebody from the two parties there to watch whenever somebody comes to find out, certify that they're registered, to make sure that they vote secretly. All that is being watched constantly. From the moment you go, you open the ballot box, the two parties agents are there to see that the ballot box is empty, number one, you see? And they're there as everybody come and vote, and they're there when you count the ballots, right? How can you do that if you have to vote outside? That's number one, that it will be open to fraud. And secondly, that they, not living in Belize, they would not be open to the reality of what is happening in Belize, to the campaign of the two different parties in Belize, etc., and that it would not be a feasible thing to do. And I think both parties kind of have that feeling now, that it would not be realistic to give the vote to Belizeans abroad.
Considering the idea of fraud, considering the population of Belizeans abroad, and election is only once every 4 years, I don't see that as a major issue for that. Now the other question, or responding to your other answer. There are some Belizeans in Belize who are not politically into intelligence or are not aware, just as Belizeans abroad.
Yeah, I was just expressing to you what the ex-Prime Minister said to me, right? And that represents, I think, the policy of both parties at this time, as far as I know.
What is their opinion on
SPARE doesn't have an opinion on that. In other words, we haven't formed an institutional opinion about that issue, right? In other words, we as an organization have certain basic political ideas, obviously. But when it comes to details, those are sort of general ideas that we try to express in our work and in our research, in our publications, in our Spearhead magazine, for example, that we publish. And I should mention here that next year we'll begin to publish a weekly newspaper, right? Starting in April of next year. But right now, details such as that, we haven't sort of developed specific policies about those.
Thank you. Diane, I was wondering if you could express to us, recently SPARE took over the scholarships from the government, right? So what I'd like to know is, basically, well, that's available to Belizeans in Belize who propose to study abroad. You know?
No, that is not true. Let me explain what, because I think you're taking up from what Diane said at some point yesterday or the day before. No, what she said was that in 1981, when Belize became independent, the government of Cuba offered Belize 25 scholarships, university scholarships, right? At that time, the government of Belize saw it fit not to accept those scholarships because it felt that it would offend the United States of America. Of course, at that time, the United States of America was not offering any scholarships to Belize, and it didn't for several years, until several years later, after what we call the Kissinger report was published. But those scholarships that the government of Cuba offered, although rejected by the government, right, were utilized by Belizeans using a different mechanism, not through the government, okay? And so several Belizeans have been to Cuba to study on scholarships. Many of them have already now returned. We have doctors, for example, agronomists, dentists working in Belize, most of them for the government, most of them hired by the previous UDP government, quite correctly too, because they came back with skills and training and qualifications which Belize needed and are being utilized. But for the last, I think, 3 years or so, we as an organization, SPARE, in response to those students who were already in Cuba and saying there is nobody here who is looking after our interests as students, and we would like some organization, and since it cannot be the government, usually you look to your government, right, to protect your interests. Since the government is afraid to do it, is SPARE willing to do it? And we said yes. We felt that, you know, it was our Belizean young people there, and if we could do anything to help them and to protect their interests and to promote their interests, it was our duty to do so. So we accepted that, and we negotiated with the government of Cuba, and they accepted us as the body, right, which would take care of the Belizean students in Cuba and which would take care of sending future students to Cuba. And so even now then, we get offers from the Cuban government for scholarships. We publish them in the newspaper, in the Mandala especially, and then we get people, you know, students writing in, applying. If we have 6 scholarships, sometimes we get 30, 40 applications. We have interviews, and we pick the 6 that we think are the best suited for these scholarships, and we send them on the scholarships. Yeah, and I think we can move that thing. That thing.
This is a point of clarification. Many Belizeans over the years have had very serious concern over your name and what it represents. I'm almost sure that nobody here can tell me they never heard of Assad Shoman and Said Musa. And the word that comes after those 2 names is communist. I'm also a part of that aspersions, but even more so yourself. And I don't think it would be fitting, and perhaps you discussed it earlier. I was moving around and didn't hear you talk on that. But I would ask that you make it very clear for people here, what is your position on that? We're not asking you to declare yourself, but we're asking you to clarify in the minds of these people who came from so many different parts of Los Angeles to hear Spear talk. Is Spear a communist group, and are you, Assad Shoman, a communist?
So I am to declare and not declare. Well, I will declare. And if that clears, fine, and if it doesn't, it's still okay. I would declare by way of a couple of examples, right? And analogies. Some of you were listening to the radio program on Friday, right? And I gave this example, and it still, to me, is one of the easiest ways of expressing what we mean. Of this archbishop, this Catholic archbishop from Brazil, you see, who has been called a communist for the work that he has been doing with the poor people. And what he said was, when I give food to poor people, they call me a saint. But when I ask, why are they poor, they call me a communist. And I think that why the powers that be, the economic and political powers in Belize, for example, began to call me a communist, and others of us as well, is precisely because we began to question why people in Belize are poor. And we said, our country is rich, but our people are poor. Why is that contradiction present? Why does that happen? I remember, in fact, that the first big spate of propaganda that began to be heard about me being a communist was very ironical, because it happened after I gave a talk to the graduating class of sixth form of St. John's College. And in that talk, I expressed certain views about the social and economic condition of Belize and certain questions about that. And as a result of that questioning, basically, of why most of our people are poor and a very few are rich, and what we should do about that, and the fact that we should change that, it was right after that that the big amount of publicity came, and these attacks and this propaganda that I was a communist. And what struck me as very funny about that is that even now, if you go back and read that speech, you will find that all of it is based on papal encyclicals, that is, on statements made by different popes of the Catholic Church, you see. And I purposely did that because I knew that the audience I was speaking to had been trained by the Jesuits, by the Catholics, right? And if anything else they should understand it is what their own pope is saying, right? But the fact is that we try to interpret these teachings and direct them to the situation in Belize, and as a result of that they call us communists. I think that it is a mistake for us then to waste our time to go around saying that we are not communists, because if in their minds questioning poverty and fighting and carrying on a constant struggle to change this condition and this system, to eliminate this poverty and this inequality and this injustice that exists, if that is in their mind, that is communist, then we should be proud to be called communists. So let's not waste time going around denying that, but rather just insisting on, if there's going to be a choice, if they're going to try and force a choice on us between capitalism, to have a minority of people who own the resources of our country. For example, you know that of all the private land in Belize, mostly North Americans, right? And that the commanding heights of the economy, if you look at who owns Belize, It is not the Belizeans that own Belize. Call the name of Castillo or the name of Bowen, and if you can call 3 or 4 others, you're calling a lot that really own Belize. And we should not run away from them simply because by posing these questions, they will call us communists. We really don't care what they call us, as long as we're posing the right questions.
And the clarification or non-clarification. I had a question that was left unanswered from my previous question. And I think this is a very good time to pose it again, and that is the spear.
It is not the Belizeans that own Belize. Call the name of Castillo or the name of Bowen, and if you can call 3 or 4 others, you're calling a lot that really own Belize. And we should not run away from them simply because by posing these questions, they will call us communists. We really don't care what they call us, as long as we're posing the right questions.
And the clarification or non-clarification. I had a question that was left unanswered from my previous question. And I think this is a very good time to pose it again, and that is, does SPEAR have a directive? Does SPEAR have a direction in which they want to mold or set sights on for Belizeans to become more active in their own affairs? And if so, what is that directive or direction that SPEAR would like to see Belize move in?
President Prime Minister George Price to determine whether 60,000 Belizeans living in California should have the right to vote in Belize or not. We think that that is the responsibility and the right of the 60,000 Belizeans living in California to determine and to decide. When the election comes about, delegates from both political parties come to California, one, to collect the little funds that you have to support their candidates, and two, to give them moral and political support. If you can give them money, moral and political support, then why can't you vote to decide which of them will be elected and which will not be elected? The direction which we want to see you going into is the direction that we have taken. Belize belongs to us, and therefore we are going to determine what happens in Belize. And that is not a job that is left to Shoman and myself and Diane and the 3 of us who are in Belize. That is a job that is left to all of us out here. We are saying that we must decide what kind of political system we have, what kind of economic system we have, where our country...
To have a party, or do you just have them asking questions?
Okay, we can say to you very honestly that we have no pretensions as an organization to form a political party. And we can honestly say that. Individually, that is another matter. An individual may want to get involved in party politics at some particular point in time. I don't know what Assad wants. Assad doesn't know what I want. We don't know what Sedi wants. But as an organization, we do not have a mandate to form a political party. But we will say this, that once people start to ask the question why, and they're not getting the kind of answers that they want, they will ultimately decide the direction that they want to go. And they may decide to form their own political party. We cannot identify who the leaders of that so-called next party will be, because we are not here to predict the future. We are facilitating a process that we believe is necessary, is absolutely necessary at this particular point in time. And the more people get involved, perhaps the more people will feel that we have to find our own way. And that is what SPEAR is all about at this particular point in time.
To welcome the delegation from Belize. It's good to have among us the caliber of Mr. Assad Shoman, the Sedi Elrington, and also Diane Haylock. We have been fortunate here in California to participate in Belizean politics and also with the development of Belize, because most Belizeans here in California have been participating in one way or another. As you know, there's at least 30,000 Belizeans here in California, and that makes up at least 1/8 of the population of Belize. So all the people here, we've had tremendous influence in 1984, we've had tremendous influence this year, 1989. And I want to assure SPEAR that all the people here from California want to participate in the development of Belize. They want to participate in party politics. They want to participate in helping themselves, because all of our goals, we all have the same common goal. Our primary concern is to have a good, peaceful, loving country. We want to have no less than a democratic system. We want to be able to project that positive image from Belize. And I feel, and I'm sure that most people here feel, that we can all do it if we unite together, we put our resources together. And what I like about SPEAR sitting in front of us today is that it presents a sort of solidarity for Belizeans, especially seeing that Mr. Shoman came out of the People's United Party in 1984. He ran. Sedi Elrington is the brother of Mr. Elrington also, who was also a minister, and Diane, a popular educator. So to me, I like the solidarity that you're presenting, and I would ask all Belizeans to join together, to work together. And right now we have 5 years ahead of us. So what we need to do is we don't necessarily have to work within any political influences or anything like that. We need to work together for the country. I understand that SPEAR wants some changes. We all want changes. But I think if the changes are good, then the people will accept it. It doesn't matter under what banner it comes. We want good changes, and I can assure you that you will have the support of Belizeans if your changes are good. I also hear members of this delegation mentioning about the colonial system, that it's not working. The colonial system needs to be changed. I know people are also asking what kind of system we should implement. What kind of system is good for Belizeans, for productivity, for peace, for tranquility? What kind of system is good? Well, I realize also you don't have the answer, but all Belizeans put together should come up with an answer one way or another. The question that I want to ask is, what are the major problems with the colonial system, and what approaches we can take to correct those problems? Again, welcome to us.
Well, I guess 3 of us can make a short comment on that if we like, right? For myself, I'd just like to very briefly point to 2 areas in which I can answer the question, the political and the economic, right? In the political area, as we had discussed earlier, right, the way we see this 2-party system working and this electoral parliamentary system working, we don't think that it's the best system for Belize. For example, right now, you have 15 PUP representatives and 13 UDP, right, in a House of 28. And because of the system that we have that we took from the British, all 15 of those PUP representatives are cabinet ministers, either full ministers or deputy ministers, right? So that there is, in that case, no separation between the legislative branch and the executive branch of government. So that, what happens? In the cabinet, those 15 people decide what laws they want to pass or what they want to do. And then those 15 people, having made that decision in cabinet, go to the House of Representatives. But if you vote on the House of Representatives, the same 15 people will vote. And not, obviously they won't vote against what they already decided, right? So that what happens to the House of Representatives? Nothing is done there to really affect the future of Belize. There's no law is really passed in the House of Representatives. It's already passed in cabinet. You see what I'm saying? And really there's no discussion that is realistic in that house, because that house does not have the power to change anything. Because an automatic majority comes from the cabinet. You move on to the Senate, it goes to the Senate, and that becomes even more of a rubber stamp. Because the Senate is made up, right, of 8 people, no? 5 of them are appointed by the party that forms the government. And those 5 can be changed at any time by the leader of the government, okay? So that it's an automatic majority, 5 out of 8, and everything that goes from the House to the Senate, obviously the Senate will pass. Because if they ever never passed it, if they ever went against it, the next day they could change those same senators and put somebody else. You understand what I'm saying? So that there is no real legislative democracy, if I may put it that way, at work in the system that we took from the British in Belize. I remember that many years ago, Philip Colson used to champion a thing called proportional representation. He used to say that, or even 28 seats, if it is lucky to win by a little bit in each constituency, right? And that means that 49% are underrepresented. So he was arguing for a new, maybe gets 10% of the votes. It wouldn't even have 1 seat, even 20%, it wouldn't have 1 seat under this system. But under proportional representation, it might have 1 or 2 seats, right? And represent the views of those forgot about proportional representation and not talk about that number. They don't want that again, because they know they could win under the same system. You understand? So what we're looking at is that the 2 parties are playing games with the people of Belize. And really it is up to the people of Belize to find, to talk about, to organize and propose a different way of running our political life, one that will give more power to the people of Belize. Because right now the people now have no power except every 5 years. You go for 5 seconds in our polling booth and mark for X. And the way things are working, the X that you mark is to choose between one party and another party. And for most things, the end result is the same anyhow. One party or the other party, it hardly makes any difference, as the people noticed in this last 5 years. Many people thought when they voted UDP in '84 that everything would change for the better and therefore people would be so much better off. 5 years later they found it wasn't true at all, right? So that...
you will recall that however many hundred years ago, the United States was trying to form itself into a nation. The United States was once a colony of Britain, and the Americans decided there and then that the British parliamentary system was unsatisfactory to them, that it was not a system that allowed for the participation of people, and the United States formed its own system, right? Some people may look at it and see it as being much more effective than the British system, and I'm not arguing about that here and now. What I am saying to you is that the American people decided that that was unsatisfactory to them, and they, in fact, had a revolution to try and make sure that they could have a system that they developed themselves. And what we are saying is that the people of Belize also have that right. The constitution that we developed was something that was just photocopied from every other country that Britain was the colonizer of. All we did was change the name from one country to the next.
I'd like to know for how many years has he been a part of the previous or present government? I'd also like to know for how many years was he a part of the government before he realized that the system wasn't working? And also, is he one of those few landowners who own such a big percentage of Belize?
Right. The sister asked 3 questions, right? Number 1, how long have I been a part of the previous or present governments of Belize? Number 2, how long was I a part of such government before realizing that the system was not a good system? And number 3, am I one of those few landowners that own a large part of Belize? The answer to the first question, how long was I a part of the government? The answer is 10 years. 10 years, right? From 1974, sorry, it's 9 years. From 1974 to 84, except 79, because I was out of government during that 1 year of 79. The second question, how long was I in government before I realized that the system was not a good system? The answer is no time at all. In other words, I realized before I went into government, the minute I went into government, the whole time I was in government, and obviously since I've left government, that the system isn't working. And I never pretended otherwise. And the criticisms that I have of the system, I have maintained before I joined the government, while I was in the government, and since I've left the government. And one of the reasons, for example, why in 1979 I resigned as a cabinet minister and as a senator was because the conflict over my views about the system and the prevailing forces at the time in the cabinet were such that I felt I had to resign. You understand what I'm saying? But from the very beginning, it was very clear that I was holding a different position about Belize's being and reality within the PUP government than virtually everybody else in the PUP. And the only reason I was really in there, and the only reason I was tolerated in there, was from my side because I wanted to work for the independence of Belize, and from the side of the party because they saw me as a useful tool or instrument or person in that struggle, because I did have my uses in that struggle. But I never had any illusions about what role I was playing and what I was doing. In other words, you know that the system is rotten, but if you can still work, you know, towards certain limited goals within that system, then I think it is your duty to do that. And the last question, no, I don't own. I used to own about 10 acres of land in Boom, but for a very short time, and then I found I really couldn't. I meant to do a little farming and things, but I found I couldn't, so I sold it, and I don't own any land in Belize.
The government, there are no checks and balances. I know that something has to be done. Okay, the rhetoric is fine. We get out there and say, okay, this is a change has to be there. Now what is their position? If there has to be a change for the Belizean people, then what are those changes suggested by Spears?
The answer is that people must organize more within themselves in different ways. Organize, organize. That is our message. Whether it's in a trade union, whether it's in a women's group, whatever. To organize and practice democracy among yourselves and try to force the governments to give you the things that you as a people, as a group, as a community need. That is the kind of message that we are trying to promote in Belize to increase the democratic participation of people. Mr. Elrington will add to that.
I would just like to add very briefly that this question raised by the brother just now typifies the problem that we have. We are not saying here at Spear that we have the solution to the problem. And this is the kind of mindset we are trying to get away from. We are trying to say to the Belizean people, don't turn to Mr. Shoman and ask him where we should go. Because suppose Mr. Shoman says communism, what are you going to do? You're going to follow him? The important thing we have got to understand is that we have the right and the obligation to determine where we are going to go. We need not ask a Spear to tell us where we are going to go, because Spear will tell you where Spear wants to go. And we do not need an Esquivel or a George Price to tell us where we want to go. We are saying to you that you must determine where you want to go. You must inform yourself, educate yourself, and then form the necessary forces and structures that you want to take you where you want to go. A point that has been exercising my mind for some time, which I'd like to make before I stop at this time, is simply to point to those people among us who have been supporters of the People's United Party for the last 40 years, or who have been supporters of the United Democratic Party or the opposition for the last 30 years. There were people who were incensed and very upset when the People's United Party lost. After 25 years of being in power, there were people who were upset. People couldn't understand it. But what kind of mentality does a person have who wants to have one party in power eternally? I mean, this is the kind of mindset we have. We believe in the People's United Party, and we would never want to see it out of power, irrespective of what it does. And there are those of us who believe in the opposition and the United Democratic Party and never want a seat out of power. It's a senseless attitude which was instilled in us through colonialism, which prevented us from thinking for ourselves. You don't support a party like how you support a racehorse. You've got to think why you support the party. And if your children and your family are going on dope, your children and your family have to leave the country where they were born to go somewhere else to live, to try to make a living, working in the snow, getting up early in the morning, and you have a country there that is so rich and wealthy with abundant resource, natural resource, and your governments are not providing what you need to develop those resources, then you have got to get rid of the government. And if successive governments come and they are not providing it, you have got to get them out. You have got to find a solution. But basically what I'm saying is that we have got to learn to think and stop asking what you are proposing, Spear, and what you're proposing, Mr. Esquivel, and what you're proposing, Mr. Lindo. We have got to propose. We are the ones who want it, and we must make the proposition. That is my position.
I wanted to add something to that in terms of some practical things that we are doing. The labor movement, as Assad mentioned, the trade unions, to all minds are very important institutions in our society. But historically, the trade unions, while they started out being fairly independent, somewhere along the line they were co-opted by the political parties and they lost their effectiveness. So as a result of that, one of the things we find is that our labor laws right now, right, those statutes that determine the direction we're going to go labor-wise, those laws have been there since the 1940s. Since 59, it was changed after. Yeah? Okay, since 1959. Now, the law says, for example, that you can become a member of a trade union. All right? But the law turns around and contradicts itself and says that the employer does not have to accept a trade union. All right? So what happens? You won't join a trade union and the employer not has to have a trade, is allowed not to have a trade union, then what happens? If you go and try to join a trade union, you're out the door. All right? Now, the problem that we're faced with is that nobody can do anything about changing those laws but the workers themselves. And how are the workers going to make a difference? One labor man can't just stand up and say, I want to change the law. It has to be all the workers. And who is going to organize the workers but the trade unions? But those workers or those trade unions are not going to do it if they are allied with the political parties that they support, right? So what FAIR is trying to do then is work with some of the more independent organizations, and there are one of two of them who are not at this particular point in time directly affiliated with the UDP or with the PUP, and in working with them to try to help to develop their leadership, to try to get them to understand the issue of trade unionism. Trade unionism is not simply getting better wages or better working conditions for workers. All right? It is
Diane said that she cannot be sure, or she cannot speak for Assad or for Mr. Elrington what they are to do. You know, what they will be doing maybe the next 4 years or, you know, for the next election. What I need to, all right, when we talk about politics, we are talking about the issues affecting the daily lives of people. All right? If you address the question of proper or improper education in a country, you are dealing with that is their individual right, it is their choice, and it has